Good evening and welcome to CITI Media Reporter. I'm Howard Homonoff, and my guest tonight is Mark Lieberman, the CEO of Viamedia and a long-term veteran in the media business. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Howard. Privileged to be here.
And don't be insulted by the long time, so I put myself in the same category. So, first, tell us what Viamedia is and sort of where it fits in the ecosystem of the TV and advertising business.
Sure. Well, Viamedia is the largest independent cable TV advertising company. Now, what does that mean? Take a step back for a second. Is that when cable networks, Turner, ESPN, Discovery, negotiate their carriage deals, their licensing deals, content licensing deals with cable companies, otherwise known as MVPDs, the MVPDs retain 2 minutes an hour so that they can do local advertising, otherwise known as geo-targeting. You aggregate up those 2 minutes an hour, that's about a $5.5 billion market called the cable spot avail business, spot TV business. And generally, the bigger cable companies, Comcast, Time Warner, Cox, Cablevision, Charter, will have their own sales force to go out and sell those 2 minutes throughout the country. And you probably have seen this when you watch the big game, the big Knick game or Heat game on ESPN, and all of a sudden there's a local ad for the local auto dealer or the local carpeting company. That's because the local cable company is selling against those 2 minutes. Well, there's a lot of cable companies, MVPDs, that don't want to insert the technology, don't want to have to manage ad operations, don't want to have to hire a local sales force, so they will outsource all of that local advertising operations to a company like Viamedia, and that's what we do. So we have 50 different MVPD partners, cable company partners, that cover about 3.5 million households. That would make us the fourth largest cable company if we were a cable company. We have 300 salespeople in the field, and we have about 12,000 advertisers in 38 different states.
And so that you mentioned it's a $5.5 billion market.
Yep.
So how much of that, roughly, is sort of your piece of that? I don't know if you measure it by revenue. I don't know if you report this, so you'll tell me what you can tell me. But sort of how much of that pie do you get to play at?
Well, again, if we have 3 million households, there are about 69 million cable households in the United States. So that's what our percentage is of the marketplace.
Right. And who's your toughest competition in what you want to do? Both, I suppose, in getting clients to come under your tent and just in selling the advertising itself.
Well, competition initially is other companies that may want to represent these other MVPDs. Sometimes cable companies want to do it themselves, so that's competitor number one, DIY, do it yourself. Second is that while I said that we were the largest independent, there are others, like Comcast does this. Comcast is the largest in the industry. I wouldn't call them independent because they have their own subscribers. So they will actually represent, ironically, some of their competitors in a market to handle their ad operations. So they will represent Verizon, they'll represent Dish, they'll represent Direct, they'll represent AT&T, competitors for video subs, but they'll actually represent them for their ad operations. Second biggest is Time Warner Cable. And then we're the third largest. If you consider Time Warner Cable and Comcast as non-independent, but if you took out the independent part, we're the third largest.
So, what does the prospect of a Comcast Time Warner Cable merger mean to you or Viamedia specifically in terms of the way your competition will change and what you may need to do in response?
Well, let me also answer a question that you asked before, which is who are we competing for when we sell advertising?
Right.
We're selling against everybody else, everyone who sells radio. You think of us as a bolt-on as part of a cable company. So we will sell against radio, we'll sell against outdoor. We do actually have online sales, so if we're in front of one of those 12,000 advertisers, we have a relationship, a long-term relationship through our 300 account executives. And so they may say, hey, geez, we want to advertise online as well, so we'll do pre-roll, post-roll, video, SEO and SEM, as well as traditional television. Television dominates the sale and the campaign. In terms of your question about what's the prospect of a larger Comcast, you've got, in terms of the rep business or the ad operations business, you've got numbers 1 and 2 combining. I mentioned to you that we have 3 million subs. Well, Comcast, they've got their own 29 million, actually 33, but they're divesting of 4 million after the Time Warner deal. So they'll have 29 million. They'll have an additional 20 million that they actually represent beyond the subs that they own themselves. So 20 million versus 3 million, they're a formidable competitor in the rep business. And so, of course, it's concerning, but I love competition.
And talk a little bit about how you compete with broadcasters who obviously had, for the longest time, so dominant in their local markets for television advertising. Sort of how does that competition work, and are there a lot of advertisers that, do you still have advertisers out there that don't, well, we do local broadcasts, but they still, in a sense, don't get cable, or they don't realize the opportunities, or are we past that?
Well, what's interesting is that the cable spot market really is a discrete market versus broadcast. Okay. So it really depends on how you define the marketplace. Is it all advertising, radio, internet, print, TV? Is it just TV? Is it just local TV? And is it spot TV? And the reason that cable is a discrete market is, one is that 10, 20 years ago, broadcast actually dominated the number of gross rating points. Well, cable has now overtaken broadcast in the aggregate, given the success of AMC with Mad Men and Breaking Bad and the Turner programming, Discovery programming, et cetera. I mean, cable is very robust. That's nationally. But when you talk about locally, the advantage is being able to geo-target. So if I am the local hardware store, the True Value hardware store, I don't want to have to buy the whole country, right, during that ESPN game when the Heat are playing. Geez, I can't afford to buy the whole country. And I may not even want to buy the whole, what's called a DMA, Designated Marketing Area. New York is a DMA. Too expensive to buy the whole DMA. But if I'm in Westchester County, and I cover even Upper Westchester County, the beauty of geo-targeting is I can just buy Westchester County, or I can just buy Northern Westchester County. I can afford to do that. So at some level, broadcast can't compete with that. It's two different markets. Broadcast, you have to buy the whole market by definition. So that's the beauty of cable advertising.
Well, I'm interested in one particular category and how you see it going, which is political. Right?
Yep.
And again, that was for a long time, broadcasting just owned that. If you wanted to be on television, you had to buy the whole market. Obviously not very efficient for somebody whose congressional district only covers part, and the geo-targeting you're talking about perfectly well suited to political offices, non-statewide, et cetera, not regional. Tell me about your sort of how you see the political marketplace and what the opportunity, the kind of the growth opportunity is there.
Yeah, I will tell you, this is obviously a political year, 2014, not a national election, it's not a presidential year, and we are 45% above budget year to date and projected to continue with that number.
And political is a big,
our biggest category is auto, which you would expect. Political is big for really the reason you just said, because you live in Tenafly, New Jersey, and if you're, I don't know who your congressman is, obviously they're up every 2 years, so if you had to buy broadcast and you're in Tenafly, you have to buy the whole DMA, the whole marketplace. The beauty of cable is that you don't have to do that. You don't have to buy the entire marketplace. You can say, I want to just buy really where my district actually airs. And that's the beauty of cable advertising. Now, you combine that with data, big data, if you will. You're able to buy a lot smarter than you ever were, which is which networks in that district should I be buying? Creates huge efficiencies. And I think we saw the success of that in the last presidential election with President Obama and what he was able to accomplish in Ohio, which is to really do a lot of target advertising on television using a lot of smart data buys.
Do you also see it or see the potential for it for the independent groups, not the candidates themselves, but for folks focused either on issues or the Koch brothers are the ones who get the most ink about this stuff. But are they focused also on in a local way, or are those agendas more national in their scope?
No, it's certainly, well, it depends on the issue. I mean, there's a lot of propositions by state, and there is a lot of issue advertising, so we do see that as well. But this is where I think the opportunity is really to explode for political advertising. We saw with the Eric Cantor huge upset a couple of days ago is that what I think that means is that any underdog can win. And while it may be a little late for some candidates to get into the 2014 campaigns, I think there's going to be an explosion of candidates, not just Tea Party, but I think Democrats who say, geez, I can raise a little bit of money, I can use television, which is this phenomenal medium. In sight, sound, and motion, television is still the most engaging medium. And I, too, can win. I only have to raise X amount of dollars. And incumbents are going to have to raise a little bit more money and buy TV in a lot smarter way. So I think that you're going to see more dollars coming into television, specifically cable television.
So I want to pick up on the thread of the sight, sound, motion, and television, right?
Yep.
So a lot of times in the popular press you read about TV, traditional business, it's over, it's yesterday's business, and everything is ultimately going to an online or digital world. Give me your perspective, and this isn't the only company or only part of the media business you've been involved in, but you've been able to see it from a few different perspectives. Kind of the present and future of what we traditionally call television or multi-channel video versus or in conjunction with other pieces of the media.
Yeah, as you alluded, I have an interesting perspective because not only with Viamedia, which I'm president and CEO of, I'm also non-executive chairman of a company called Rightster, which is an online video web syndication company. And the whole focus for companies like Rightster is to aggregate up enough audiences so that you can start to emulate TV-size audiences. Because at the end of the day, the advertiser just wants to be in front of the right eyeball. Is the right eyeball at the right time in the right platform so that they can ultimately drive the sale. In an increasingly transactionally driven economy, it's all about affecting the actual sale of a product or a service. And I believe that television, sight, sound, motion, video, sight, sound, motion is still the most exciting medium versus some of the more stagnant media like print, out of home, quite frankly, even radio. So with television, it depends on how you define a television. What is a television? Is a television that screen on the wall that you watch and you don't really care what's on that screen? It could be a YouTube video. It could be your home media. It could be your favorite cable program or broadcast program or live sports, etc. Or is TV programming? And I really think it's the latter. That big screen just happens to be the medium in which you watch. And now you can watch your favorite TV program on the big screen. You can watch it on your iPad. You can watch it on your PC. You can watch it on your smartphone. And the reality is that for a $150 billion business, television, programming, that's what it costs as an industry, half of that is supported by advertising. The other half is by subscription. Well, consumers don't want to really be paying more than they already are, $100, $200 a month. So it's always going to be an ad-supported model. And so the reality is that advertisers are now challenged as to where do I advertise on any one of those medium, big screen, smallest screen, and they want to be able to get in front of those right eyeballs. Television itself, programming is going through a renaissance, a golden age. The amount of programming you can watch is just extraordinary. Sports is going through the roof. But the amount of programming is unbelievable, as I mentioned before with AMC and Discovery and Turner and the like. And so that's the challenge for advertisers, is how do I actually get in front of the right eyeball on the right medium?
So from a Viamedia perspective, do you worry about a portion of the market that goes more and more towards the YouTube and the truly independent kinds of programming that's not coming through the cable operator, that's not not part of what you're selling? Are you worried about that continuing to chip away from an audience perspective?
The answer is yes, but I think what happens is that the dollars come out of more non-accountable media, like print and out-of-home and radio, which is much more difficult to measure whether there's a real return on your investment. Reminds one of that old joke, that John Wanamaker line, which is half my ads are effective, I just don't know which half. And so I don't know that the $70 billion for television advertising actually reduces. I don't know that digital video, I guess now is about $6 billion, and television is just shy $70 billion. I think both of those continue to grow and take dollars out of non-accountable media or even out of direct marketing. direct marketing, which is a great medium but is very expensive, is very inefficient, is that television using data, things like addressable advertising, dynamic ad insertion, big data, set-top boxes, you're able to have much more accountability on television than you ever were, so it starts to look like what you can actually do online with web video.
So talk a little bit more about Rightster, and where does it fit in that sort of I'll use the ecosystem term again, right, in the kind of enablement of the distribution of video online, or in a digital environment.
Rightster has really a fascinating and a very special place in the web video market. Rightster is not looking to be a destination portal. It really is a 360-degree video monetization platform. Now, what does that mean in practicality? Is that we at Rightster have about 1,000 different video producers and content producers for video that range from the mom and pop that want to create viral videos that we all love and see on YouTube or sometimes off YouTube, to tentpole customers like Australian Rules Football, where all their non-Australian distribution is on Rightster, to British Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week, The Guardian, the AP of France. So some large video content producers on the one hand. And on the other hand, Rightster has about 8,000 publishers in their network, online publishers. And what Rightster does is it takes the video from the 1,000 and it syndicates it out into that 8,000 in the network. It runs all the back office. It maximizes advertising, again, whether it's off YouTube or on YouTube. There's some e-commerce partners, customers like Australian Rules Football. So it really is a complement, and if you want to try and monetize video online, Rightster is one of the leading platforms in the world.
Are there a lot of those folks that you compete with, that Rightster competes with?
Not really. Similar to Viamedia, the competitor there is one DIY, do-it-yourself, companies saying, hey, I can do it myself. But even bigger companies, you got to go out and hire a large digital video team in-house to create the video, monetize the video, how do I syndicate out that video, what are the right networks? And Rightster just launched something called Engage, and what Engage does is Engage is really audience amplification, which is, okay, you got that video, which websites do you put it on? Which publisher sites do you put it on? How do you put it in front of the right eyeball so that you can maximize whatever you're trying to accomplish, brand equity building or media sales?
You know, we've been talking about, you've got a number of different businesses that you're involved in. I want to go back to Viamedia a second and just, you know, you're a pretty new CEO there, beginning of the year, and talk a bit about coming in. It's not a company, as you've done in other circumstances, where you found it and you sort of saw it from you know, the proverbial guys in the garage stage. So what's it like coming in as the CEO of a new, in this case we're talking about the media business, but it could be any business, coming in and dealing with the challenges and try to take advantage of the opportunities you get?
It's a great question. You know, my previous companies, as you alluded to, a number of them I founded from scratch and built it, and a brick at a time, raised the venture capital, and you know, that's hard. What's nice here is that there were two incredible founders of Viamedia, Jeff Carter and Todd Donnelly, and they had the vision to say that there's a number of these cable companies, MVPDs, that didn't have the capability or the want to go and monetize those 2 minutes an hour. And Jeff and Todd came out of that business. And so they built it from scratch, not raising venture capital money, to a company that by the time they sold it 3 years ago to Lake Capital, a world-class private equity firm based in Chicago, they sold it about 3 years ago, and at that point in time, substantial company with about between 300 and 400 employees on staff all around the country. And so what I inherited, if you will, as the new CEO, is really, instead of starting from scratch, really starting from a higher plane, which is phenomenal. And what I've done in the last 6 months is making sure that we leverage the great culture that had been built by Jeff and Todd. Jeff had been both the founder and CEO for many years. He's still on the board, as is Todd, so I still call on them. But I was able to bring in some of my own management. So I brought in a new chief operating officer, a woman named Kim Norris out of Cablevision, who ran the advanced advertising group at Cablevision, and before that, she was with Comcast Spotlight. So really understood local sales as well as advanced advertising, which I guess we'll talk about in a moment as to what Viamedia is doing. but then also to be able to put my imprimatur on in terms of where the industry is going from a data-driven media selling to programmatic media selling, to being able to look at the convergence between the two. And what I found really appealing about Viamedia, and this is a little bit contrarian, is as the world is going to more frictionless, more programmatic, more data-driven, we have 300 local salespeople. And those 300 local salespeople are a phenomenal resource that give us a unique advantage in the world of technology. And the flip side is that in the world of traditional media sales, that Viamedia had started to make some of these technology investments. So it's really the combination of the two that attracted me to Viamedia. But you're right, it's not like starting it from scratch. It's taking a great platform, not messing with the trajectory and the culture that you're on, but being able to leverage that so that you can really supercharge.
But the ultimate analog resource, a human being, still matters in the scheme of a sales business where, as you say, more and more of it is, certainly the perception of more and more of it and some of the reality of going towards programmatic and using data and taking people out of the equation, at least to some degree.
Well, I think so. In that, if you take a look at that $70 billion market called TV advertising, there's a lot of long-tail inventory that's going either underutilized or it's not maximized in terms of its value. And that's where things like programmatic and technology and data can really drive the business. But that never is going to encroach upon the traditional TV buy. One of the great things that I've done over the last couple months, and first 3 months I did really nothing but just going around the country, meeting our teams, meeting our partners so that I could be smart in terms of any changes or modifications we wanted to make to our business plan. One of the more fun things I did is go on ride-alongs. And going on ride-alongs with our account executives in places like Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Ohio, Rockland County, New York, and going to meet from the big auto dealer to the small auto body shop or the motorcycle shop or at the college in New Rochelle who's a customer of ours, an important advertising customer of ours, and really hear what their motivations are, what their objectives are. And they don't know necessarily from impression-based selling and programmatic and set-top box data and all the things that you and I have talked a lot about over the last couple of years. So our job is to kind of take that technology, marshal that, but then we're sitting in front of an account to say, we can put you in the right places, on the right programs, so you can actually speak to who your audience is that you're trying to reach.
So, but how about the advanced advertising, sort of the next wave of it, as you talked about? Talk about how you see that. I know you've got a new product or a part of your business, Place Media. Talk a little bit about that, what role it is and will play in the kind of next wave of the advertising.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Place Media specifically. Place Media is a programmatic online ad exchange for traditional television. Now, what does that mean? What that means?
I'm glad you got to my next question.
Yeah, well, I can sit over there if you want. So what it means is that think of the way the internet works. The internet works in a computer talking to computers. So if you're online, if you're doing online advertising, and you're trying to reach a particular type of audience, I want to reach men 25 to 54 years old who own this kind of car, who like to golf. These are all the targeted ads and the retargeted ads that you see on the internet. You'll be on one website, and all of a sudden you'll see the golf ad, and you'll be on a different website, you'll see the same golf ad. It's kind of following you around. That's retargeted advertising using programmatic ad exchanges, and that's the direction that the internet has taken, and it's even gone to the next step, which is real-time bidding, which starts to emulate actually how Wall Street works. So huge efficiencies. Television will start to evolve to that. Now, as I alluded to earlier, not necessarily for the tentpole programs and the big programs. That's still going to be addressed in the TV upfront markets that happen once a year, or even in the scatter market for some of the more successful programs. But certainly for a large portion of the inventory, you want to, as an advertiser, be able to talk to the right audience, and you really may not care what program you're on, what network you're on. You just want to be in front of that right audience. And that's what Place Media does. Place Media addresses automation, so it creates huge efficiencies, as well as programmatic, insofar as you're able to log on to the system through our portal, the Place Media portal. You then can identify the audience that you want to try and reach, and then in a blind auction, it will actually place the ad on different networks, on different programs, different day parts. And you can actually block it, so you may not want to be from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So you can say, I don't want to be during that day part. You can block certain networks that you may not want to be on. So there is a fair amount of customization. But this is the direction that the industry is going. And there's some other companies that were a little bit earlier than Viamedia. But again, what I like about it is the fact that we've got that army of salespeople around the country that we can start to train how you sell advertising by impressions, by audiences, as opposed to by GRPs, gross rating points, and by networks and programs.
Well, you raise, that leads me to media measurement, which has been really one of the, in the digital environment, one of the great frustrations for so many people, advertisers, sort of across the board, a lot of different, and some think maybe it's been a drag on digital doing as well as it could have or should have done given the eyeballs that are there. How much of a challenge is media measurement or the future of it around TV and getting a kind of a common next generation metric as opposed to GRPs or households or the kind of traditional demos at least that have been around?
You know, it's interesting. I think media measurement is key to all of it. And there's two parts to measurement. There's looking afterwards at whether or not you reach the right audience. And then there's in the future, which is media planning, or to make that more frictionless in injecting that data that you can measure media on for purposes of programmatic or even just smarter media buying. And set-top boxes are the key. If you think about a set-top box is effectively the perfect meter. I came from my last company, was in that business, in the set-top box aggregation business, was acquired by TiVo. And TiVo itself is the perfect meter. It actually tells whoever's acquiring and harvesting that information, it's actually saying what is being watched or what is being potential to be viewed on television every second of the day. Unlike a Nielsen meter, which is polling every seconds or minute, or certainly better than a Nielsen meter, a diary, and there's still 150 diary markets, believe it or not, where people are filling out diaries that are trying to remember what they watched for the past week.
From people who can't remember what they just had in their last meal.
Exactly. So set-top boxes are the key to media measurement because there's tens of millions of set-top boxes that are out there. There's great companies like Rentrack. Rentrack has been adopted by CBS and just a couple of days ago, announced by Fox, to be using the set-top box data from Rentrack to be having much more granular, much more actionable data for media measurement. But what's nice about that set-top box data is the ability to actually use that for media planning purposes, as well as for programmatic buying and selling of television.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how the industry plays all that out, and the set-top box data has been, in a sense, kind of the golden goose that everybody's been after for a long time.
Yep.
With that, I want to thank you, Mark, for joining us tonight, and thank you for joining us on CITI Media Reporter. I'm Howard Homonoff. Good night.